Thanks for watching today's video. Today's video is brought to you by Cove and their speaker, the Commuter 2 Split. Now, why is it called the Commuter 2 Split? Well, first and foremost, it is a portable speaker with up to 30 foot of range on Bluetooth. It has up to 7 hours of battery life on one charge, and it's water resistant. But more importantly, this speaker actually splits into two portable speakers that you can set up within a range of each other. It's really nice. It does those cool little speaker things like that have the good bass in them when they get that volume going, so it's really good quality. We're gonna play some Big Bad Bosses for you guys right now. First off, this is what it sounds like when it's one speaker. It's pretty loud.
Got it going on, back until the break of dawn.
So if you want to pick one of these bad boys up, head over to cove.com/TC64. What does TC64 stand for? Well, the Completionist 1, and 2, 64% off your purchase. That's right. If you buy this right now using my code, you get 64% off this Bluetooth speaker this month only. So again, if you want to grab this bad boy, head over to cove.com/TC64. Thank you to Cove for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for watching, and now back to the show.
Live, die, repeat, try, die again. Grow frustrated, walk away, come back, succeed, scream in triumph. This is the typical experience I've had playing Dead Cells over the last year or so. Though this arc remains consistent, it seems like nothing else in this game does. I've had to revise and re-revise what it means to complete Dead Cells. I almost feel like I've had to relearn how to replay it because of how often the game has been changed and updated, and how significant those updates are. As this game constantly evolves and reinvents itself time and time again, I have come to believe that Dead Cells is more than a game. It's a state of mind where every single choice makes a difference. Come for the choices, stay for the pain when I complete Dead Cells.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Completionist, where we don't just beat the games, we complete them. Today's episode is a very special day because obviously it's Dead Cells, but more importantly, it was our goal and promise for us raising money for the charity event known as Indieland, which we created. This is our third year doing Indieland. It actually starts tomorrow with our opening ceremonies on September 20th over at twitch.tv/thecompletionist, and all week long we're raising money with other streamers and YouTubers, and you can join the cause if you sign up via Tiltify in the box down below, as well as the next weekend, which is September 25th through the 27th, we'll be playing games all night long with celebrities, YouTubers, streamers, and of course, developers who have worked on these games tirelessly for the last few years. So come join us. Let's raise money for dementia research to help those who are impacted by dementia. We'd love to have you. And that brings us full circle to today's game, Dead Cells. Why did it take me almost actually more than a year to complete Dead Cells? Well, first off, it's flippin' Dead Cells. Huge name behind it at this point as an indie game in the space. Lots of content to be ingested into it. But the big reason why is DLC. They keep releasing DLC. I have had to start and stop this game for so long because they keep releasing DLC. And probably by the time I'm even done talking, there's going... Look at that, new DLC. New DLC! Whoa!
Here comes a new challenger! Yes! Danger! Perfect!
It seems like every modern game is a combination of genres. Looter shooters, action platformers, etc. But Dead Cells is a truly unprecedented combination, that of the roguelite and Metroidvania. By combining these two seemingly at odds genres into one gigantic, cohesive piece, Dead Cells became a 2D indie game phenomenon. Roguelikes and their derivative, the roguelite, have had a huge resurgence over the last decade or so. Spelunky, The Binding of Isaac, and Into the Gungeon are all very different games, but they all share a similar design philosophy. Procedurally generated elements and permadeath make these games feel special every time they are played. But there's a reason I play procedurally generated games on Super Beer Bros and not usually the Completionist. I love playing them, but completing them is a whole different beast. There is often no clear roadmap on how to complete them because they're full of random drops and secrets that are found years after release. In contrast, Metroidvanias are ideal for the show because they tend to reward completionists. Finding every hidden wall and secret area as the map gets filled up has always been satisfying. With indie games being more popular now than ever, Metroidvanias such as Hollow Knight are having a resurgence as well. And then came Dead Cells, combining the best of both Metroidvanias and roguelites into one gigantic package. Dead Cells became an instant hit. It's an incredibly unique blend that feels one of a kind in gaming. There are still procedurally generated environments, but there are also permanent upgrades to unlock. Both genres of games had been on the rise, but it felt like Dead Cells sparked a whole new type of 2D game. It has all the stakes of a permadeath game, but there is still a sense of progression throughout. With the very first Indieland, fans voted that I completed Hollow Knight. This time around for Indieland 2, it was Dead Cells, and I can honestly say I'm grateful, but I can also say, what the f did all of you sign me up for? Dead Cells is gigantic and feels more huge every time I attempt a run. In Dead Cells, the players controls the Beheaded, a body mysteriously missing their head. The land is beset by a mysterious and deadly plague-like affliction called the Malaise, and the king has taken extreme measures to contain it. The Beheaded is on a mission to kill the king and anyone protecting him. They are helped by side characters like the Blacksmith and the Collector, but for the most part, there isn't any plot that's laid out for the player. Everything must be inferred on their own or discovered in secret rooms. Completing Dead Cells requires mastering difficult 2D combat and platforming. This game has multiple playthroughs with progressive difficulty, as well as a glut of collectibles that asks players to grind currency over the course of hundreds of runs. There are no shortcuts to earning every collectible, and the game just keeps on growing. Constant, substantial updates have kept the game feeling fresh, even though completing Dead Cells requires dozens of hours to master. Every attempt feels significant, and every choice the player makes has cascading effects. So I knew going in that completing Dead Cells would be a war of attrition that I fought and won over a long period of time. But the more I played it, the more I realized that successful completion would depend on more than just sinking huge amounts of time and praying for random lucky drops. Instead, Dead Cells turns out to also be a game where skill matters just as much as luck, and player choice eventually becomes the deciding factor for completion. Completing Dead Cells immediately comes across as daunting. There are dozens of weapons, shields, skills, and outfits to unlock, and doing so ultimately comes down to good old random chance. We're talking loot. Copious, egregious, unapologetic amounts of loot. As a roguelike game, Dead Cells has a short average runtime, and it quickly becomes clear that the short runtime is intended to be supplemented by the sheer amount of random drops contained in this game. Yeah, it's technically the same couple of areas containing the same old bosses over and over again, but have you gotten your hands on that sweet spiked sword yet? The general loop of this game is fueled almost entirely by keeping players addicted to their hopes of the next great big drop just being right around the corner. And there's absolutely a ton of drops that can appear during gameplay. Everything from equipable weapons such as blades and bows to more specialized combat skills such as deployable turrets and traps to ensnare one's enemies. Throw in passive buffs, new abilities, and several costumes, and you've got enough content here to keep you busy for a long time, assuming you're willing to put in that time. Now make no mistake, if you want to obtain every single one of these items, it's gonna take eons, because it's not like most of these items can drop for you out the gate. Instead, with a handful of exceptions, Dead Cells utilizes special items called blueprints. Instead of finding an item you want, you'll first need to find its blueprint and bring it to the collector between biomes. Only then can you unlock the chance of finding the actual item it pertains to while you play. Now, how do you unlock that chance? With cells. They're this game's basic currency, and they're needed to unlock just about everything. Most importantly, those blueprints. So after you manage to find a blueprint and then purchase it at a vendor, sometimes for hundreds and hundreds of cells, then maybe you'll actually find that item during one of your runs. This means that acquiring items in this game comes down to hoping for specific loot drops, so then you can purchase that item that you already had found so that you can have a chance of finding an actual usable item as yet another loot drop. In other words, this game thrives on grinding. This goes for basically every single item in the game. Yes, some of them are unlockable by other methods, like how certain outfits are tied to beating certain bosses, challenges, or even specific lore rooms. But the vast majority are the purview of Lady Luck, which makes completing this game take just as long as you'd imagine. Even when using online guides to farm in certain areas with specific enemies or on certain playthroughs, there's only so much that one can do to mitigate the time spent hoping and praying. I have dropped hundreds of hours into this game at this point in my life. It's an absolute grind, even on the player's soul. And if Dead Cells was only a loot fest, I wouldn't think much of it. But Dead Cells is more than that. And that starts to become apparent when you're on the hunt for the items that only appear in harder difficulties. We're not talking selectable difficulties or alternate ways to play the game, but rather an effective New Game Plus that's only accessible upon defeating the supposed final boss. Doing so will reward the player with a boss cell that, when used at the start of a new playthrough, will permanently raise the toughness of enemies, their behaviors, and the types and amount of them that show up. It'll also limit the amount that the player can heal themselves to. As players obtain more boss cells by repeatedly managing to beat the final boss, things get progressively tougher as the playthroughs escalate all the way to the equivalency of a New Game Plus 5, known as Hell Mode. But once players reach this playthrough, their entire catalog of unlockables are finally available to them, but grinding at this level will only take a player so far. On Hell Mode, mindlessly looting and farming will reap many rewards, but some are locked behind true tests of the player's knowledge and skill. Moreover, merely attempting to coast by on the skills you've relied on lower difficulties will get you annihilated. Instead of repeating a routine like I was living in Groundhog Day, I learned to be a stone cold combat master like it was Edge of Tomorrow. For example, I never really used much defense early on. I didn't have much need for blocking or parrying since I was able to get by with a more offensive style. I killed everything quick enough that defense wasn't really a thought. That changed later on. When things started to get tough, the parry technique went from a negligible option to an absolute necessity. I couldn't afford to get hit anymore, so I was forced to adapt. In much the same way, the many different weapons and skills that I once implemented and switched between on a whim got whittled down naturally and gradually, where once I was able to use whatever passive buffs I wanted, at a certain point, just surviving in Hell Mode meant relegating myself to a specific set of items. Every choice had much more weight. One wrong move in a boss fight can spell the end of a good run. Choosing one route over another now drastically affected how my run would go. Equipping a single item over another can ultimately end up meaning success or defeat long down the road. What was once a mindless grind for items became a skill-based fight for survival. At the very end of the day, it's true that I was still grinding for loot drops, but at least Dead Cells provides difficulties that keep the player's attention and keep the process from getting too boring. It was a bit of a double-edged sword, however. While it was more engaging and fun to play, it was unequivocally harder to make it through. The same goes for Dead Cells' seemingly unending stream of post-launch content. This game stays fresh, dropping new updates that fundamentally change how the game is approached and played. And although it's fun to experience new stuff from a game as good as Dead Cells, new content just ends up meaning more stuff to master, more time spent grinding, and more time spent completing. All right, so I thought high level play in Dead Cells would be more determined by luck, since I never knew what I would come across in terms of items and upgrades. But ultimately, it was skill that carried me through, because I had spent the time to master every little thing. It was never easy, and the way updates fundamentally changed how certain mechanics worked didn't make things any easier. But it was so much more satisfying to fight my way up to where I wanted to be. I only wish the game's rewards for doing the impossible were as satisfactory. Every additional boss cell the Beheaded is infused with makes Dead Cells more difficult. At 4 and 5 boss cells, the game is soul-shakingly hard. But after acquiring every single item and defeating every single boss, I can say that though the satisfaction is immense, it just isn't f***ing worth it. The achievements in Dead Cells are, with a few very prominent exceptions, very doable. Again, I've been playing this game for a few runs at a time for the better part of a year, so most of them I just happened upon naturally. The most difficult achievements were defeating the bosses without getting hit once and beating the game with 4 boss cells active. Achievements are their own rewards here. The disappointment continues with the real completion rewards. I've said it many times. Dead Cells is hard, but it's also disheartening. Losing cells from dying and restarting runs starts to feel like a huge setback in completion. It starts to feel personal, like I'm not good enough. As soul-crushing as it is to restart a run, at least I can look fly as hell, I guess. It's my depressing silver lining. In fact, Dead Cells pretty much only rewarded me with different cosmetics. It's cosmetics all the way down. I appreciated that the devs that reference other games, shows, and inside jokes that only a few people would get. I'm not against the idea of unique costumes as a concept, but for a game this difficult, I would have loved a little bit something more here. When I completed Dead Cells, there were 69 outfits unlocked, including ones based on Cloud Strife, Donatello, Piccolo, Goku, Gordon Freeman, and even M. Bison. 126 total weapons, shields, skills, and powers found. 41 mutations discovered. 26 biomes traversed, including boss rooms. 260 hours played, because that's the only way to experience this game at my current skill level. Lots of time and lots of deaths. And just under 46,000 cells paid for everything. Sadly, that doesn't include the amount I've lost.
Dead Cells was a monster of a game to complete. It's the kind of game that gave me just the little bit of panic when it was suggested as the Indieland pick. For me, I wish there was a little more meat to the completion rewards, but I do love that this game is always giving you something, even if it's just mostly costumes. That said, I think I can definitively say, as the game currently stands, this is one of the most difficult games that I have ever in my life had to complete. The skill, the patience, the frustration, and all in all, it was like a drug addiction. It just kept bringing me back more and more and more until I got sick of it. And by the time I'm done, I'll never actually be completed with it, because there will be more DLC packs, I'm sure, to come in the future. So, with that in mind, guys, I give this game my completionist rating of finish it.
Finish it!